A pleasant morning to each and everyone. Welcome to our online learning class. But before we are going to start, let me introduce first myself. I'm your teacher at Personal Development. I'm Miss Quisel Jane Di Carrion. Welcome to our fourth week of online learning for the third quarter. Our topic was evolution of Philippine politics and governance. The way Philippines is governed is consistently evolving. It depends from various factors on a particular time. This module will revisit and examine the way Philippines were governed on a particular time. Eventually, the politics during these times was diversely affected. Our present government is a result of the experience of the previous governments. Through time, the way we are governed are voted for the people considering that Philippines is the democratic government. These are all embodied in relevant document which is so-called the Constitution. What's new? Read the poem written by Jose Rizal. Write a letter in response to Jose Rizal. Write this letter in a piece of paper to be submitted to your teacher. The title of the poem written by Jose Rizal was To My Fellow Youth by Jose Rizal. Whenever people of a country truly love the language which by heaven they were taught to use, that country also surely liberty pursue, as does the bird which soars to free space above. For language is the final judge and referee upon the people in the land where it holds sway. In truth, our human race resembles in this way the other living beings born in liberty. Whoever knows not how to love his native tongue is worse than any best or evil smiling fish. To make our language richer ought to be our wish, the same as any mother loves to feed her young. Tagalog and Latin language are the same, and English and Castilian and the angels' tongue. And God, whose watchful care all is flung, has given us His blessing in the speech we claim. Our mother tongue, like all the highest that we know, had alphabets and letters of its very own. But these were lost, by furious waves were overthrown, like bangkas in the stormy sea long. The history of the Philippines is believed to have begun with the arrival of the first humans using rafts or boats at least 67,000 years ago, as the 2007 discovery of Calauman suggested. Negrito groups first inhabited and isles. Groups of Austronesians later migrated to the islands. Scholars generally believe that these social groups eventually developed into various settlements or polities with varying degrees of economic specialization, social stratification, and political organization. Some of these settlements, mostly those located on major river deltas, achieved such a scale of social complexity that some scholars believe they should be considered early states. This includes the procedures of modern-day populations, centers such as Maynila, Tondo, Pangasinan, Cebu, Panay, Bohol, Botoan, Cotabato, Lanao, and Sulu, as well as some polities such as Mai, whose possibly location are still the subject of debate among scholars. These polities were either influenced by the Indian Hindu religion, language, culture, literature, and philosophy from India through many campaigns from India including the Southeast Asia campaign of Brahadri Kala I, Islam from Arabia, or were signified tributary states allied to China. This small maritime state flourished from the first millennium. These kingdoms traded with what are now called China, India, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. The remainder of the settlements were independent barangays allied with one of the larger states. The first recorded visit by Europeans is the arrival of Ferdinand Magellan. He sighted Samar Island on March 16, 1521, and landed the next day on Homonhon Island, now part of Guiuan, Eastern Samar. Spanish colonization began with the arrival of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi's expedition on February 13, 1565 from Mexico. He established the first permanent settlement in Cebu. Much of the archipelago came under Spanish rule, creating the first unified political structure known as Philippines. The Spanish colonial rule saw the introduction of Christianity, the code of law, and the oldest modern university in Asia. The Philippines was ruled under the Mexico-based Viceroyalty of New Spain until Mexican independence, after which the colony was directly governed by Spain. Spanish rule ended in 1898, with Spain's defeat in the Spanish-American War. The Philippines then became a territory of the United States. American rule was not uncontested. The Philippine Revolution had begun in August 1896 against Spain, and after the defeat of Spain in the Battle of Manila Bay, began again in earnest, culminating in the Philippine Declaration of Independence and the establishment of the First Philippine Republic. The Philippine-American War ensued with intensive damage and death, and ultimately resulting in the defeat of the Philippine Republic. The United States established the insular government to rule the Philippines. In 1907, the elected Philippine Assembly was convened as the lower house of a bicameral legislature, and in 1916, the U.S. federal government formally promised independence in the Jones Act. The Philippine Commonwealth was established in 1935 as a 10th-year interim step prior to full independence. Before independence, World War II or World War II began and Japan occupied the Philippines. After the end of the war, the Treaty of Manila established an independent Philippine Republic. In 1972, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos imposed martial law. Following the assassination of Ninoy Aquino Marcos, held snap elections in 1986 and subsequently fled the country during the People Power Revolution, which installed Cory Aquino as president and re-established democracy. The pre-Spanish government. The early Filipinos had a government which they called balangay. Raha or dato is called for those head or leader. There were three social classes at that time, namely the maharlika or nobles, the timawas or freemen, and the aplipin slaves. Visaban Famire was established with a seat in Sumatra about the 7th century and extended to the places now known as Java, Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, Borneo Celebes, the Moluccas, and the Philippine Islands. At the end of the 13th century, a new empire called Mahajapet was founded in Java, which absorbed the Sierra Visayan kingdom. At about the end of the 14th century, this new empire comprised all the territories controlled by Sri Visayan Empire as well as Siam French Indochina, Borneo, and New Guinea. The culture which predominated in these two empires was Hindu. The greatest pre-Spanish influence on the Philippines was, therefore, the Hindu influence. Hindu culture had given the early Filipinos a system of writing, a mass of religious ideas and practices, though not a well-defined religion, and a general culture far superior to that of the aborigines, the Negritos. It had taught them some mechanical and industrial arts such as metalworking, but it had not greatly changed the structure of society, nor had it brought in ideas of well-defined national political organization. At the time of Spanish discovery, according to H. Atle Bayer, not only were the more civilized Filipinos using the Indian syllabaries for writing, but their native mythology, folklore, and written literature all had a distinct Indian cast. The same was true of codes of laws and their names for all sorts of political positions and procedure. The more cultured Philippine languages contain many Sanskrit words, and the native art a noticeable sprinkler of Indian design. A strong Brahmanistic religious element was also certainly introduced, though it seems to have affected chiefly a limited class, while the mass of the people still clung to their more ancient pagan worship. Time and again, scholars have affirmed that the Filipino people did not gain as great material benefits from the Spanish occupation as they did spiritual ones. Government in the Philippines under the Spanish rule. During the Spanish period, the people of the Philippines were governed indirectly by the King of Spain through the Viceroy of Mexico. In theory, he was highest government official in the country. In practice, through phylocracy, rule of the friars, Mexico, the former colony of Spain, gained her freedom in 1821 and ruled directly by Spain until 1898. The government during the American regime. Americans started the military rule in the Philippines on August 14, 1898. President of U.S. delegated his authority to the military governor who exercised all powers of the government as long as the war lasted, the executive, legislative, and judiciary. The government under the Japanese occupation. Japanese military administration was established in Manila on January 3, 1942. Philippine Executive Commission is the civil government established with George B. Vargas as chairman. Ultimate source of authority was the Japanese administrators. It was dissolved August 17, 1945. Definition of terms: politics, a form of process of civil government on constitution. Regime, a system or planned way of doing things, especially one imposed from above. Evolution, the gradual development of something, especially from a simple to a more complex form. Commonwealth, a self-governing unit voluntarily grouped with the U.S. social stratification, a system by which a society ranks categories of people in hierarchy. Phylocracy, rule of warriors. Jahafanet, a Javanese Hindu-Buddhist, the Laksocratic Empire in Southeast Asia, based on the island of Java that existed from 1293 to circa 1517. Brahmanistic, an Asian Indian religious tradition that emerged from earlier Vedic religion, emphasizing the status of the Brahman or priestly class. For the inquiries, you may click the link https://lcms.gaitf.com/ or you may contact 0975-27-08093 or 0951-3032-796. Thank you for listening. This is Miss Crisel Jane Dicarion, your teacher in political, politics, and government. Once again, good morning everyone.